Today's devotional is found in Romans chapter 12, verse 3. I'm using the English Standard Version today for reading. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned us. One of the most plaguing problems common to the Christian life seems to be finding our proper place in the body of Yeshua. All too often people take on positions within the body that don't really match up well with the gifts that they've been assigned to. For example, people who are only gifted to teach think that they can be administrators. And sometimes you find administrators in the humble origin of teaching. They can also take on titles of a prophet. I see a lot of people taking on the position calling themselves prophet, or having that title assigned to them as being a prophet or prophetess. Yet I never hear a word coming out of their mouth. I've gone into certain groups and organizations, met Bishop so-and-so, prophetess so-and-so, apostle so-and-so, missionary so-and-so. I've never once seen any of the ones with the title of missionary out on the streets. In fact, most of the time, strangers coming into church are greeted more warmly by a cold shoulder than an outstretched hand. Except a couple of cases which were usually placed on my shoulder and escorting me out of the church instead of embracing me and bringing me in. A second problem common to Christian life is finding the proper level of our place within the body of Yeshua. All too often, people who have been gifted to operate in lower levels think they can handle more, or people who have been gifted to operate are higher in their level than they think. They don't do as much as what they should. Many times, people act as if they should have something in church. I've seen people walk in basically off the street and expect to take the offices of pastors inside of a church organization, rather than attempt to find a nice little niche where they could be of help and work their way up the ladder if that's where the Lord really wants them. But Danny, God called me to. Well, if God's called you to these offices and to these positions, those doors would have opened to you, buddy, and you'd be there. I've seen a lot of new works open the door with 2 or 3 people taking on large buildings and running up huge debt, rather than finding a little home and starting with a house prayer meeting and saying, this is what God's given to me, perhaps. Somehow we feel that the stars in our eyes and the camera on our face makes us more important than what we really are. We have more people who believe in preaching the gospel of me than there is preaching the gospel of he. To whom the bridegroom calleth, he says, come. When we are called to go, we should be going. And when we're told to stay, we need to be staying. We keep calling ourselves being the members of the, quote, army of the Lord, unquote. And yet we act like insubordinate misfits, rather than falling in line, standing attention, and listen to our commander-in-chief tell us what to do. The key to the solution of both problems is the same: to do everything in accordance to the faith that Yahweh has given us. The key is to do what He wants us to do, not what we want to do or what we think we should be doing. The emissary Paul, or Shaul, points out that sober judgment is required here. There's a great temptation to think so highly of ourselves that we ignore what Yahweh really wants in our lives and what He has gifted us, both to be as kind and to work in that level of servitude. The Bible teaches us that we are to serve one another, not lord over. Too many times we are Baal, and not enough time are we Adonai. True Christian faith is always properly oriented to God's revelation, or Yahweh's revelation of Himself and His will. We can save ourselves a lot of grief and heartache by taking the time to discern what God's will is in these matters, and taking the time to render sober judgment and being guided by faith, born in the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit. Take a look at our lives. Are we truly followers of Yeshua? Do we accept Him as Master in our life? Or are we acting like we are the prince and princesses and demanding our crowns and our gold and our legions, and having people bow before us and say, "Whoa, you then are a Pharisee if you act this way." Puffed up with your offices, shored up by your finances, and doing nothing really constructive to building up the faith and edifying one another. You're attending a congregation or group that is arrogant, proud, and boastful. You need to take a look if this is really where Yahweh has sent you. Mind you, sometimes we are sent into these places to bring a different reflection of what Yahweh is all about and following in His paths. There are many people who are out there teaching against Paul. Yet these Paul's words, written by him, show a sign of humility. Do not listen to these people who are arrogant and seek only to be platted upon themselves. It is not Torah to judge people who are dead. The man cannot defend himself, and any person that stands up are quickly put out from amongst them. This behavior has to be looked at by Messianics as a whole and Christians. He was commissioned by the Jewish Sanhedrin, the Messianic Sanhedrin, to go into the world. He was okayed by James the Lesser, who was the leader at the time, not Peter, of the church proper as a whole, the brother of Yeshua himself. We need to understand that we have a proper way to act before God. Consider yourselves who you are in your place. Humble yourself, the song says, in the sight of the Lord, and He, Yahweh, will raise you up. Till next time, this is Daniel Bome saying shalom and blessings to you.